The Keltharian homeworld of Zephys had been beautiful once. Its twin moons cast silver light across floating cities that danced among the clouds, connected by bridges of crystallized starlight. The peaceful Keltharians had built their civilization on harmony, their gentle blue-skinned people living in perfect balance with their world's delicate ecosystem. They had no weapons, no armies, no concept of war. The Vorthak hegemony changed everything. These reptilian conquerors arrived in massive dreadnoughts, their scaled hides reflecting the burning cities below. They came not for resources or territory, but for sport. The Vorthaks found pleasure in dominating peaceful species, turning them into slaves for their gladiatorial arenas. Within days, the floating cities crashed to the ground, their crystalline bridges shattered like broken dreams. Deep in the underground caverns beneath Zephys, Keltharian engineer Jorix worked frantically on an ancient communication array. His four-fingered hands trembled as he connected the final circuits. The device hadn't been used in centuries, designed only for the most desperate emergencies. Around him, the last free Keltharians huddled in fear, their bioluminescent patches dim with exhaustion. "Will anyone even hear us?" whispered Corveth, the former city coordinator whose elegant robes were now torn and stained. Jorix looked up, his large violet eyes filled with determination. The Galactic relay network spans thousands of systems. Someone will hear. Someone must hear. The message that went out was simple but heartbreaking. It spoke of a peaceful people facing extinction, of children taken from their families, of a world dying under the weight of cruelty. The Keltharians didn't ask for weapons or soldiers. They asked for mercy, for intervention, for someone to speak on their behalf to the Galactic Council. For weeks, the message traveled through space, bouncing from relay to relay. Most species ignored it, too afraid of the Vorthak hegemony to risk involvement. The powerful Zenthari Empire considered it briefly before deciding the cost was too high. The ancient Milcranians debated in their councils for days before choosing neutrality. But in the outer rim of the galaxy, in a yellow star system called Sol, something different happened. The message reached a species that had once been prey. Themselves, a people who understood what it meant to fight for survival against impossible odds. Humans had clawed their way up from a death world where everything tried to kill them, where they learned that sometimes the only response to cruelty was overwhelming force. Captain Marcus Kane stood on the bridge of the Earth Defense Force flagship, Retribution, reading the Keltharian message for the 5th time. Around him, his crew watched in silent fury as they processed the images and data from Zephys. "Sir," his tactical officer, Lieutenant Hayes, spoke quietly, "Command is asking for our recommendation." Kane looked out at the stars, remembering his own childhood on Earth's harsh frontier colonies. He thought of humanity's long struggle to reach the stars, of the countless times they had been told they were too violent, too unpredictable for civilized space. "Tell Command," Kane said, his voice carrying the weight of decision, "that humanity is going to war." The Vorthak war chief Grexus stood on his command deck, watching his latest batch of Keltharian slaves being loaded into transport ships. His scarred hide bore the marks of 100 conquered worlds, each scar a trophy of a civilization brought to heel. The reptilian commander's yellow eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he watched the broken spirits of his newest victims. "War Chief," his Lieutenant Scrix hissed, mandibles clicking nervously. "Long-range sensors are detecting multiple warp signatures approaching the system." Grexus barely looked up from his meal of live Keltharian fish. "Probably more scavengers hoping to profit from our conquest." "How many ships?" That's the problem, sir. The count keeps rising. 47, 52, 68 ships, and still climbing." Now Grexus paid attention. His massive head swiveled toward the sensor display, reptilian eyes narrowing. The signatures were unlike anything in their databases. The energy patterns were crude by galactic standards, but there was something disturbing about their intensity. "Identification," he growled. Scrix's voice cracked slightly. "Unknown species, sir. The registry says human." Grexus laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "Humans? Those backwards mammals from the outer rim? They barely qualify for spaceflight, probably coming to beg for scraps." But as the fleet dropped out of hyperspace, Grexus's laughter died in his throat. 89 human warships materialized in perfect formation, their hulls bearing the scars of countless battles. These weren't the sleek, elegant vessels favored by most galactic civilizations. These were brutal, functional instruments of war, built by a species that understood conflict in ways the pampered galaxy had forgotten. The lead ship was massive, its hull matte black and bristling with weapon systems that defied conventional design. The humans called it the Retribution, and it moved through space like a predator stalking prey. Captain Kane stood on his bridge, studying the Vorthak fleet deployment. His executive officer, Commander Torres, moved beside him with practiced efficiency. "Target analysis complete, sir," Torres reported. 43 Vorthak warships, various support vessels, and... "Captain, they have civilian transports, loaded with Keltharian prisoners." Kane's jaw tightened. This complicated things, but it didn't change the mission. "Signal the fleet. Execute Liberation Protocol 7. Throughout the human fleet, crews moved with deadly precision. These weren't regular military personnel, but volunteers from Earth's merchant marine, colonial defense forces, and even civilian ships retrofitted for war. Miners, farmers, factory workers, all united by a simple truth: nobody enslaves innocence, while humanity draws breath. On the Vorthak flagship, Grexus watched in growing alarm as the human ships spread out in a pattern he'd never seen before. It wasn't standard fleet doctrine, wasn't anything in their tactical manuals. "They're surrounding us," Scrix reported, his voice high with panic. "Impossible," Grexus snarled. "We outnumber them. Send a transmission. Demand they withdraw or face destruction." The response came immediately. Broadcast on all frequencies in perfect Vorthak standard. The voice was calm, almost conversational, but carried an undertone that made even hardened warriors flinch. "This is Captain Marcus Kane of the Earth Defense Force. You are holding innocent civilians as prisoners. You will release them immediately and surrender for trial. You have 30 seconds to comply." Grexus's roar of fury echoed through his ship. "These mammals dare threaten the Vorthak hegemony. Open fire, destroy them all." But as his weapons powered up, something unprecedented happened. The human ships didn't try to evade or negotiate. They simply waited, like apex predators confident in their superiority. When the 30 seconds expired, the galaxy learned why humans were called Death Worlders. The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. In the underground caverns of Zephys, the surviving Keltharians felt the planet shake as orbital bombardments rained down above them. But these weren't the cruel, indiscriminate strikes of the Vorthaks. The humans targeted with surgical precision, each shot calculated to destroy military assets while sparing civilian areas. Jorix monitored the communications array, translating the human tactical chatter for his huddled companions. "They're coordinating with our resistance fighters," he said in amazement. "They've identified every prison transport, every slave-holding facility." The human fleet had split into 3 groups. The first engaged the Vorthak warships head-on, their weapons tearing through energy shields like they were made of paper. The second group focused on disabling the prison transports without harming the Keltharian captives inside. The third performed an impossible feat. They launched ground assault teams while still fighting a space battle. Captain Kane watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. His ship shuddered under Vorthak fire, but the Retribution was built to take punishment. Around him, his crew worked with mechanical precision, each person knowing their role in humanity's first major galactic intervention. Direct hit on their flagship's engines, Torres reported. They're dead in space. Good. Signal the boarding teams. Time to collect our prisoners. On the Vorthak flagship, War Chief Grexus stumbled through smoke-filled corridors as his ship died around him. These humans fought like nothing he'd ever encountered. They didn't just defeat enemies, they dismantled them with ruthless efficiency. "Sir!" Scrix appeared from a side passage, his scales blackened by fire. "They've breached the lower decks. They're heading for the command center." Grexus snarled, drawing his ceremonial warblade. "Let them come. I'll show these mammals what happens when they challenge their hegemony." But when the humans finally breached his command center, Grexus found himself facing something unprecedented. The lead figure wasn't wearing powered armor like his warriors. Instead, she wore simple combat fatigues and carried a standard projectile weapon. This was Lieutenant Colonel Rebecca Okafor, Earth's most decorated Special Forces officer. "War Chief." "Grexus," she said in perfect Vorthak, her dark eyes showing no emotion. "You are under arrest for crimes against sapient life." Grexus roared and charged, his massive form dwarfing the human female. His warblade could cleave a Keltharian in half with a single swing, but Okafor had been born on Earth's African continent, where humanity learned to hunt creatures 10 times. Their size using only intelligence and persistence. The fight lasted 3 seconds. Grexus found himself face down on his own deck, his warblade shattered, his arm twisted at an impossible angle. The human's knee pressed against his spine, with just enough pressure to remind him that she could snap his neck whenever she chose. "The Galactic Council will hear of this," he gasped. "You cannot simply attack a sovereign species." Okafor's voice remained calm. "The Galactic Council already knows. We sent them our evidence files 12 hours ago. Turns out they're very interested in prosecuting war criminals, especially when someone does the heavy lifting for them." Above the planet, the last Vorthak ships were surrendering or fleeing. Human medical teams were already aboard the prison transports, tending to traumatize Keltharians with the same gentle care they'd shown lethal force to their captors. In the command center of the Retribution, Kane received reports from across the system. Minimal human casualties. All Keltharian civilians secured. Primary Vorthak fleet destroyed or captured. But the most important message came from the planet's surface, where human ground teams had linked up with Keltharian resistance fighters. The species that had cried out for help was now free, their planet liberated, their people safe. Kane smiled for the first time in weeks. Phase 1 was complete. Now came the hard part, teaching the galaxy that some things were worth fighting for. 3 days after the liberation of Zephys, the galaxy was in chaos. In the towering crystal spires of the Galactic Council headquarters on Nexus Prime, emergency sessions ran around the clock. Species that had maintained careful neutrality for centuries suddenly found themselves choosing sides. The human intervention had shattered more than just the Vorthak fleet. It had broken the illusion of galactic stability. Ambassador Thylex of the Zenthari Empire stood before the assembled council, his golden robes rustling with agitation. "The humans have violated every principle of galactic law," he declared, his melodious voice carrying across the vast chamber. "They launched an unprovoked attack on a sovereign species without council approval." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled delegates. The galaxy had rules, procedures, diplomatic protocols. Wars were supposed to be clean, limited, affairs with predetermined outcomes. What humanity had done was barbaric in its efficiency. But then Corveth of the Keltharians rose to speak. The former city coordinator had been evacuated to Nexus Prime along with other survivors, his peoples. Testimony crucial to the proceedings. His voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the vast chamber. Ambassador Thylex speaks of violated principles, Corveth said, his violet eyes scanning the assembled delegates. Where were these principles when my children were taken? Where was galactic law when our cities burned? For 6 months, we broadcast our suffering to the stars. 6 months of slavery, torture, and death while this council debated procedure. The chamber fell silent. Many species had received the Keltharian distress calls. Most had chosen to look away. The humans came not because it was legal, Corvette continued. They came because it was right. They risked their lives for a species. They had never met, asking nothing in return. If this is barbarism, then perhaps we need more barbarians. On Earth, President Harrison Chen stood in the Situation Room deep beneath Geneva, surrounded by his military advisors and cabinet members. The weight of humanity's first major interstellar conflict pressed down on everyone present. Status report. Chen requested, his weathered face showing the strain of sleepless nights. General Patricia Voss, Earth's top military strategist, activated the holographic display. The Vorthak hegemony is in full retreat. Their remaining fleets have abandoned their outer colonies and consolidated around their core worlds. However, we're detecting military buildups from several other species. Who? Chen asked, though he suspected he already knew. The Mylcranians are mobilizing their war-sphere fleets. The Zenthari have activated their reserve battle groups. Even some of the neutral species are strengthening their defenses. They're all afraid of us now. Chen nodded grimly. This was exactly what Earth's leaders had feared. By demonstrating human military capability so dramatically, they had potentially started an arms race that could consume the galaxy. Any word from Captain Kane? Still at Zephys, overseeing the prisoner transfers and helping the Keltharians rebuild. The communication networks. Sir, there's something else. We're receiving messages from across the galaxy, other species asking for help. Chen's eyebrows rose. What kind of help? General Voss hesitated. Everything. Border disputes, piracy problems, slave trading operations, territorial invasions. It seems word of our intervention has spread. Oppressed species everywhere think we're their salvation. And are we? Chen asked quietly. The question hung in the air like smoke. Earth had fewer than 5 billion humans scattered across a dozen colonies. They had powerful technology and impressive military capabilities, but they were vastly outnumbered by the combined forces of the galactic community. Sir, Admiral Thompson spoke up from his corner of the room. Captain Kane is requesting permission to address the Galactic Council directly. He believes he can prevent this from escalating into a galaxy-wide conflict. Chen considered this. Kane was a good officer, but diplomacy had never been humanity's strong suit. They were better at ending conflicts than preventing them. Granted, Chen decided, but tell him to be careful. The galaxy is watching us now, and one wrong word could turn every species against humanity. Back on Zephys, Captain Kane received his orders while standing in what had once been a Keltharian temple. The beautiful structure was being rebuilt by human engineers working alongside grateful Keltharians. It was exactly the kind of cooperation he hoped to see spread across the galaxy. Lieutenant Colonel Okafor approached him, her expression serious. Sir, we've completed the interrogation of the Vorthak prisoners. What we found changes everything. Kane turned to face her. How so? The Keltharian raid wasn't random. It was a test. The Vorthaks were hired by someone else to gauge galactic response to large-scale atrocities. Someone wanted to see if the galaxy would stand up to organized evil. Kane felt ice form in his stomach. And now they know the answer. 6 months later, the galaxy had changed forever. The Galactic Council chambers buzzed with unprecedented activity as representatives from over 300 species gathered for the most important session in galactic history. At the center of it all stood Captain Marcus Kane, no longer just a ship commander but humanity's first galactic ambassador. He wore his dress uniform with quiet dignity, the scars on his hands telling the story of a species that had fought for everything they'd achieved. Behind him sat the other members of what the galaxy now called the Terran delegation: President Chen, General Voss, and surprisingly, Corveth of the Keltharians. "The proposal before us today," announced High Chancellor Vextai, her crystalline voice carrying across the vast chamber, "is unprecedented in galactic history. The establishment of an independent peacekeeping force operating outside traditional council authority." The chamber erupted in debate. Some species feared giving humans too much power. Others argued that traditional diplomacy had failed too, many times. But the deciding factor came from an unexpected source. "I wish to address the council," came a voice from the observer section. The speaker was elderly even by Keltharian standards, her bioluminescent patches dim with age. This was Elder Simphis, the most respected philosopher in Keltharian society. "For 1,000 years," she began, her voice carrying the weight of centuries, "our people believed that peace came from avoiding conflict. We thought that by refusing to fight, we could avoid being hurt. The Vorthax taught us the price of such thinking." She paused, her violet eyes finding Kane in the crowd. "But the humans taught us something different. Sometimes peace must be defended. Sometimes the only way to protect the innocent is to stand against those who would harm them." Elder Simphis gestured to the holographic display showing recent galactic events. In the months since Zephys, human ships had intervened in 17 different conflicts. Pirates preying on trade routes found themselves facing Earth Defense Force patrols. Slave traders discovered their operations shut down overnight. Border bullies learned that their victims now had powerful friends. "The humans ask for nothing in return," she continued. "No territory, no tribute, no special privileges. They simply refuse to let evil go unopposed. If this is not worthy of our support, then what is?" The vote, when it came, was closer than many expected, but decisive enough to change everything. The Terran Peace Initiative was officially recognized, granting humanity the right to intervene in cases of clear aggression against peaceful species. After the session, Kane found himself on one of Nexus Prime's observation decks, looking out at the stars with Corveth beside him. The Keltharian had become more than an ally, he had become a friend. "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" Kane asked quietly.